the girls with their nails done now. Girls with their nails done. The girls with their nails done.
Bienvenidos a esta nueva charla. Hoy justamente tenemos un invitado súper especial en el marco del Game Jam Plus. Y por eso estamos hoy con la organizadora justamente pues, de México, nuestra querida Isa, que desde Quintana Roo está llevando a cabo este evento. ¿Cómo estás, Isa?
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias. Muy contenta de estar aquí presentando a Randy. Y muchísimas gracias, Andy, por ser el host de esta noche. Bienvenidos a todos.
Justamente quiero advertirle a todas las personas que nos están viendo en este momento que esta conversación va a ser enteramente en inglés, aunque nuestro querido Randy Vázquez es justamente hispanohablante, ha crecido mucho más en los Estados Unidos y pues su idioma natal prácticamente es el inglés. Entonces, pues Randy nos puede entender un poquito en español, pero Betty no explico mucho. Mientras tanto, les tengo que contar pues que tenemos a un señor, o sea, con un recorrido. Este hombre ha estado como, no sé, es que tiene una hoja de vida que es gigante. Seguramente él
Enorme.
dentro de su propia presentación nos cuenta un poquito más de lo que él hace, pero miren, ha sido game designer en Sony Santa Mónica, o sea, canta. Ha trabajado en Ubisoft, ha sido el technical designer en Cloud Imperium Games, ha trabajado como former designer en Carbine Studios, también así en 38 Studios, en Raid Indigo y pues en Electronic Arts. O sea, además, pues también pues ya es senior game designer en Ubisoft de Singapur. Senior Encounter Designer en Counterplay Games y pues Game Designer para todo, ¿no? O sea, creo que Randy hoy nos va a dar una charla brutalísima sobre justamente usar estos Battle Types para hacer juegos. Y pues Randy, qué felicidad. ¿Algo extra que quieras comentar, mi querida Isa?
Sí, ¿por qué fue que a mí me encantó haber invitado a Randy a esta charla? Porque yo creo que es el sueño de todo mundo pertenecer a grandes estudios, ¿no? Como Santa Mónica, como Ubisoft. Entonces, es como una pequeña muestra de que sí podemos pertenecer a ese tipo de estudios y por eso es que tenemos a Randy aquí. Bravo,
Thank
sí.
you.
Bravo.
Yeah, Randy,
Welcome, Randy, welcome, Randy.
So, it's like funny because I'm listening and I was like, man, so all my thunder, like half my presentation's gone now. Thanks.
Oops. Mejor. So it's going to be like a super easy presentation for now. So, gente, ahora sí empezamos esta vaina en inglés. Disfruten este espacio porque tenemos una gran presentación para esta noche.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, and it's awesome to be here. And so far, like every time I've traveled and talked to people about different games and stuff like that, it's just been really awesome to just talk to tons of different type of gamers, talk to different types of developers and stuff around the world. And I've been pretty fortunate. Like I've gone to Gamescom, I've gone to I worked E3 a few times and stuff like that. So it's been like all over the place. But today, since we're going to be gearing up for a game jam happening this weekend, I figured, you know what, let's talk about Bartle Types. So let's dive in and let's kind of start off with some of my actual experience. So they've mentioned some of my experience and stuff like that. So here are some of the companies that I've worked at in the past. It's been like about almost 20 years since I've been starting this kind of road. And kind of back then, we didn't really have that many Hispanic and Latino kind of people within the industry. It's been kind of just very much predominantly just one type of people, right? So now we're getting more diverse, more women, more Hispanics, more Black and brown are joining this industry, and it's great. It's a really good stepping stone for the industry. So like I said, Currently, I'm working at Counterplay Games. I'm a senior encounter designer working on the game Godfall. So these are actually some of the titles that I've shipped as a designer. I've worked on way more titles than this, but sometimes those titles don't actually see the light of day. Some of them you work on for years and then they just don't release. It's kind of sad, but then you work on a lot of little indie projects that also are the same way, right? So this kind of goes back and forth with things. So today we're going to talk about one of these games in particular, and sadly it's not going to be God of War because that one was awesome to work on. We're not going to be talking about we're not
No.
talking about Fire and Darkness or Star Citizen or Warhammer, but today we'll be talking about WildStar in a later time.
Ooh.
So to kind of discuss the thing, right, is like, well, first of all, like, kind of everyone's like, well, what if you don't really know what a Bartle type is, then okay, what is a Bartle type? You know, who is Bartle? Why are they important? Kind of, and like, why are we talking about a game that came out many years ago, you know, instead of something more modern? And then kind of hopefully ways you can start looking at ways that the Bartle types can actually help you in your game jam, kind of help you design some games and design content for your games. So let's start off with the who, right? So Richard Bartle, he was a game designer. He created MUDs back in the 70s. And, you know, like these were some of the first games that were being created for like multiple users, and users would jump in. And over time, he started talking to these people. He started studying kind of what motivated the players to play, right? A lot of people, when you talk about design or even like UX design or kind of UI and anything like that, right? You start talking about the flow of why people do certain things. You're starting to talk about like, what's the motivation of the person, right? Why are they doing certain things? So in 1996, he classified the player types into a matrix. And this is the gentleman right here that did a lot of the foundation for our industry, especially with like MMOs and like big multiplayer games, you know? So he was a teacher, he was a designer, he's written a few books on AI, on building worlds within like these huge things. So like he's done a lot of the foundational work for us to use as designers as we go, because we're going to continue pushing this industry forward with our ideas, with our concepts, and with everything else that like everything that we have and we put into this industry is going to keep on getting better, you know? So let's talk about what these are, right? So these are the categories that fit within the matrix. We have the killer, achiever, socializer, and the explorer, right? And each one of these caters to a different motivation that the player will have, right? So basically, these are very self-explanatory when you look at it as in like the competitor, the completionist, the team player, and the world traveler, right? Those probably conjure up images within your brain and being like, okay, this makes sense. I think I know what this is about. So it's pretty surface level, but let's dive into it. Part of this matrix is actually being there where we have it to where it's a player-centric versus a world-centric. And then we have acting versus interacting. So on the player-centric versus the world-centric side, we have the killer and the socializer being kind of paired up for the player side. We have the achiever and the explorer paired up on the world side, right? So being that we had a couple of definition earlier, and so that you can kind of see like, okay, this makes sense, right? So then we go to acting and interacting. Now, the killer and the achiever now are paired up because they are acting. Now, one is acting on the players and one is acting on the game world, where on interacting, the socializer and the explorer, one is interacting with other players, the other one is interacting with the world around them. And these subtle differences kind of, you can start looking at different mechanics and being like, okay, where does it fit on this thing? So if you start throwing, darts at the board, you'll kind of get this thing is to be like, all right, where do we want to have this feature? Where do we want to have this mechanic? What type of player are we trying to attract with this content or with this game, right? So this is the overall matrix itself and how it kind of lines up. So we've kind of talked about what the Bartle types are already, right? So they're 4 characters. Each player has a mix of these motivations within themselves, right? I'm not a pure killer. No one is a pure killer. No one's a pure socializer. No one is a pure any of these. It's always a mix of these motivations. And sometimes those motivations of the player can change within the moments. So, for instance, let's look at some examples, right? Killers, they are motivated by competition, PvP, high scores, leaderboards, and stuff like that. And these games are kind of epitome of those, right? Like Magic the Gathering is such a huge game that probably tons of us have played. League of Legends, StarCraft 2, Pokemon. So like Pokemon is a game, it's an anime, and it's also a card game that's like multiple genres, multiple generations of players have played this game, right? Even in the song itself, it speaks about being the best, collecting them all and stuff like that. And that's multiple motivations, right? So then we look at the achievers, right? And this is from Final Fantasy 14, some characters, right? But the achievers are the ones that they want to complete that thing. They're the completionists. They're the ones that go after the achievement hunting, they're the ones that basically platinum a game. Why? Well, because they need to platinum the game. It's to them, it's that motivator, right? So like they're collecting gear. You play like Borderlands or something like that. Like they're the ones that are like going and they're grinding to get the best gear and find that one purple, that one legendary and stuff like that to kind of just make it so that they're like, this is amazing, this is awesome. Like that's what really lights them up. And then looking at the explorers, the name is very self-explanatory, but games like, Breath of the Wild, it is very much though, like I am a huge nerd of like Breath of the Wild, where I was like, oh my God, what is over this? What is over here? What is over here? What is over here? Like I would pick a place on the map and then kind of just like search around that area until that whole area was done. And then I would move on to another area. And it's like that kind of sense of wonder, that kind of like finding where all it is. Even when I played like old school JRPGs and stuff that had a fog of war, I would go crazy and trying to find all of those fog of war where basically it was set up to like, I cleared the map and I was like, oh my God, all right, I cleared the map. I discovered everything, Then we have the socializer. And these are the people that you've seen in MMOs where like a lot of the crafters, a lot of the people that do these type of gather jobs and stuff, and they're just hanging out with other people and they use the game as a mechanic, to just keep in touch with people, hang out with people and socialize. I know during the pandemic and stuff, a lot of people turned to gaming, and a lot of games actually created a lot more content just for this type of behavior. So that way people can jump in and be able to start talking to people and keep in touch. I know my cousin, so that him and I would constantly just, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Oh, I'm kind of busy. You want to jump on a game? I can make time for that. And boom, now we've made time for each other. Now we're socializing in a game, even though we're doing a dungeon together, or, we're sitting back, just like chilling, exploring, watching me die, to whatever random thing is about to kill me. So it's all about that cooperation play, that team work and stuff like that. And like, there's really no games that are specifically one of these types, right? It's always going to be a mix of things. And then how you combined these Bartle types together to kind of help the players with their motivations. That way you can lure them on and play the game longer, right? So again, we're gonna come back to the matrix, right? And then just look at this, figure out where you want the mechanic, figure out kind of where you want things, where do you see things being, what do you think your players, your demographic that you're targeting, what would they enjoy? So this is just things to kind of think about, So this brings us to a part of the conversation where is WildStar. It's an older game. I don't even remember when this game launched. It's really sad because I helped launch it. Oh man, I should have got those pictures in here. But here's the team, me not being in the picture, but we had a team lead. We had Josh, we had Woody, we had Matt and myself, and each individual designer, we took a path and we had a design goal, right? So when we came together as a small team built within like a large team of like 300 something people, right? We were only, including QA and one of our writing helpers, like we had maybe 7 of us all together. And the main problem is that when you're putting together a large, massive game, right? Each individual player has a different motivator. even though they can become together in the same game, they still have different activities. They still have different things that they find fun within the game, right? So how do you cater that? Well, the Bartle Types is kind of how this was solved within WildStar, right? And when the players first started the game, they made their characters and they chose a race, right? Then they chose a path that they wanted to choose, right? So basically, the the path is going to kind of outline what content that the person will want to play or will enjoy the most, right? So then we have the challenge, okay? How do we make content to fit these motivations? How do we make the content to be like, hey, this type of player wants more of this gameplay, but doesn't want more of this gameplay? This gameplay is annoying to this person, but this gameplay is fun to these people. How do you get them in the same game, enjoy the different content separately or together, but then how do they kind of like come together as a whole, right? And this is kind of where we recognize that players will constantly participate with all different types of content, but they do it because they have to, because they're rewarded for it, you know? So like you have that kind of like the carrot on a stick, right? Where all players will do everything, but they won't necessarily enjoy it. So then how do we give those people that enjoy different type of content more of what they enjoy and reward them for that, while the other ones don't have to do that same content? And this is kind of where I talked about is each individual path had a goal, right? And that goal was to make the content that these people would enjoy. And that was also broken down by each individual designer basically had a they had their own goal. We can play this video.
On it, is this the first one? Yes.
Yes, first video.
So, people, we have you here a little bit of a good content that Randy has prepared for us. Chan chan chan.
So this is actually something we released to the public and to show off the game and what paths were, because it's a new concept.
Hello. Excuse me. Excuse me. There. Much better. Each and every one of you has chosen a particular path that will determine your responsibilities once we have arrived on Nexus. It is important that you are well informed of the imminent dangers associated with this choice, despite the fact that few of you will actually survive them. Let us proceed. Soldiers, legendary heroes in the making. Your mission will be to conquer the deadly creatures, hostile natives, and military opponents you encounter on the planet's surface. Will there be glory for some of you? Indeed. For others. Scientists, for you, knowledge is the ultimate weapon. As you delve into the scientific mysteries of the Elden, you will systematically analyze the exotic flora and fauna found on the planet. Unfortunately, most of it will be trying to eat you. At least your deaths will be for a noble cause. Explorers, such a bold and adventurous group. Prepare yourselves to chart this wild new frontier, braving some of the most dangerous and inaccessible locations on planet Nexus. Undoubtedly, you think this sounds exciting. Please provide your next of kin before departure. And settlers, dedicated builders and pioneers. Your duty is to tame this hostile alien world, constructing beneficial structures for your friends and allies. Understandably, your enemies may not appreciate your efforts. Oh, it was unfortunate. unfortunate. So, as you can see, the choice of your path brings with it a number of challenges. Fortunately, for those of you who are looking for a way out, I have a different alternative. Any takers?
Ay, me encanta.
Plans dismissed.
So
Oh, I love it, Randy.
yeah, it's super cute, and like that's the kind of the stuff that we were kind of trying to come off when we were trying to create these paths, right? Because like there's so much like personality, there's character to it and stuff, and the thing is each individual path kind of was so different from each other that we couldn't make them like that. Because like a lot of games they try to balance it to like, oh, we have one mission of this and we have another mission of this, we have another mission of this, another mission of this, right? So you can't go one to one. And sometimes not balancing something is actually balancing in itself, because you need to figure out, you know, what people have. So like really quickly, we're going to go down the missions types for each individual ones, right? So the soldier, we had assassination, we had rescue ops, we had holdouts, we had demolitions, we had SWATs, right? And the thing behind this though is the soldier was just, they had big huge weapons, they had a lot of little mini boss fights and stuff like that. So assassinations were sometimes boss fights. I also had like placed some things with assassinations where you got, if you found a little poison in this little area, you could pick it up and then put it on the meat of someone else because he's barbecuing something when he's not looking away, and then you can walk away and he eats the meat and he poison him. You know, so like there was little fun little things you could do like that. I mean, poisoning people is not fun, but in this context, it's super fun. But you know, the rescue ops where you're using guns and traps and stuff like that to blow people up. The holdouts was these, you would sit in a location to defend, and then like hordes of monsters would just come attack you. Demolition was where we got to do stuff with like cool things with grenade launchers, and you see the soldiers just shooting grenades and stuff like that, blowing everything up, you know, and just having fun. Like there was a quest. It wasn't necessarily a path quest, but I remember there was a quest. I forgot who set it up, but there was a quest where they had this little rouse tower where there's like this little goat, and you put a bomb on it, and then they would have a timer, and if you timed it so that it got near other goats, then it would just set off like a series of explosions. And it was so fun just watching people just do that and try to come up with some really crazy ways to get the most of the goats to explode at one time, you know? And one of the rescue ops was we had these little flying saucers, and the flying saucer went over a human or a cow or one of the goats and stuff like that. You had to like jump and knock them out of it, right? So like we had a lot of fun just building some of this content. The scientists, since they're achievers, right? They basically would be kind of collecting things. So they would analyze things, like all of the analysis, biology, catalog, the diagnostics, the archaeology, like the botany, chemistry, field study, like all that was part of collecting, and all that was sending people out to do things, to grab things, to basically put it into a category, right? So like this was definitely a big like achievement type hunters type of thing. So all of that collection. Then we had the explorers, and the explorers were like, you know, cartography. How do you do cartography? You know, you go to this point, this point, this point, this point, put the beacons down, boom. Now you've explored this area and sent that data along, right? And they had actually things set up in the game that you couldn't get to these areas unless you had an explorer with you. You couldn't get to some of the areas unless you had a scientist with you, because a scientist would scan something and power it. Then the explorer, he would be able to open it because he had the ability to do so, you know? So as time went on and we started solidifying what the different paths were, we actually started kind of using the paths together. Like I remember a mission that we did where, so the soldiers always had these huge big weapons, right? But then we did a mission to where they were going in digitally to protect against like, you know, viruses and stuff, and from hackers and everything like that. So then because it's digitally and we're not that smart, like soldiers, you know, then like when we went in there, we had the smallest mecha, but then the scientists, which are not the big weapon users, they had the biggest baddest mechs, and then the settlers and the explorers had the normal size ones. So then if you went in a group together, all these different size variances because of the context of where you're at, really kind of spoke nicely to it. And then the last one, of course, the settler. They're the ones that did expansion, supply cache, public service, civil defense, and infrastructure. And they're the ones that actually built. So when you went to a quest hub, everyone can actually control, all the settlers can contribute to kind of one thing in the central hub. And if you built it up, sometimes a bar would show up. Sometimes a weapons cache would show up. Sometimes different things would pop up, and quest givers would just pop up sometimes. So the kind of like, we needed these different things. So like the weapon box would kind of show up, and then we would have it set up to where the settlers would build it and it would unlock things, right? And a box would show up, and then a soldier would come over and unlock that box for everyone else. So then they can get charges for their ultimate weapons. So kind of doing this duality where like people would start working together. We started building content so that way people had a place, people had a role, kind of like if you play like Call of Duty and everything, you have the officer will give you ammo and this person will give you something else. So there's a lot of different roles that players can fill within this. So we had to really look in how we were designing the paths, because each one was so different in what we think the content needed. We were like, all right, we want to design it this way. We want to design it this, but it cannot be equal to what the rest of the content was, because no content was the same between the different paths. So this kind of goes into the question of like why the Bartle types are important, why we can like really helped us create the targeted content. It really helped us like kind of figure out what kind of stuff the player wants to do. Kind of like, how Facebook, Google, they're like, they're profiling us right now, as we speak. But within the game itself, talking to the user researchers, talking to the UX designers and stuff like that, like they've really helped us nail down to like profiling what the demographic wants, what the demographic actually needs, and then quantifying how much content we need per path, per player, and kind of like per level, right? This is all super important things that as you start building games, you really, really need to start kind of diving into a lot more. So one of the big things that we started looking at is we took a lot of inspiration from just media in general, whether it was anime, movies, whether it was real life, kind of all that stuff like pop culture. And we started asking ourselves a lot of questions, basically of saying, what do the players want? What do the players expect? And what do we expect the players to do, right? And how do we make each individual path feel different and then keep to the core belief of what we think that path is? So it's a lot of times when you go into design, especially working at big companies, right? It's like content is just assigned to a group, and then that content is created. So like before the path team was created, it was just a team of 6 people over here, a team of 6 people over here, a team of 6 people over here. Each one would be taking care of a zone, and they would just create the content, the path content that they thought was actually necessary, what they thought was needed. But then we had no consistency across the path itself. So the path team was actually created to kind of create that consistency, create the core beliefs, and create the core mantra of what we think each individual path is, So like, for instance, Soldier, if anyone has seen Aliens, they know this scene where he's talking about, the Colonial Marines are the ultimate badasses, they're the ones that are going to basically kill everything. It did not work out too well for them in this case, but, for the most part, all the soldiers, are looking at that, where it is basically set up to where it's this monologue and he's just talking about how cool and how badass they are. And that kind of, I saw this, or one of the guys actually says like, hey, this should be the mantra. And it was like, yes, this is what we think Soldier is, this is awesome, right? So then we started looking at all of the Soldier content that was created, and does it fit within this monologue, So I've watched this thing so many times. But yeah, I'm gonna move on so we don't watch all the videos. For the scientists, right? We started looking at, okay, what embodies the scientist. And all honesty, we started looking at Doc Brown. We started looking at Scully from X-Files, you know, Dr. Farnsworth, Ghostbusters, Rick Sanchez, you know, and stuff like that. And just the collection of knowledge, the research that they go through, kind of the processes that they went to kind of prove their points. But at the same time, it's like, how do they collect it? How do they go about it? What makes them interesting as characters, you know? And this is kind of like a mishmash of how we kind of like just smashed them all together and was like, all right, this is what we think scientists are, you know? And scientists actually had the most types of missions out of all of this because it was really hard to kind of categorize it into like 4. And again, this goes into the balance of things. It's like some of these are a little bit simpler and some of the paths are a little bit more complex. So why are we balancing it? We don't need to balance it. The people that are the achievers, the people that are going to play this type of scientist stuff, they're going to want to learn about all the history, the lore, and the backstory of this planet as they're going around, you know, scanning things. They're going to want to know everything about it. The soldier, like me, and so that I'm going to be playing stuff, and I'm like, yeah, click, 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 click. I don't care what you said. What do I got to do now? And I just look at, like, you know, the next step in the quest. Okay, I got to kill something. Got it. I'm going to run off and go kill it, you know? So again, like, this goes back to just talking about like the lack of balance, but it's okay to not be balanced, you know? The Explorer. And we started looking at, like, you know, Nathan Drake, Lara Croft, Indiana Jones, and stuff like that. And of course, here I have the video for, like, you know, Indiana Jones, where he is, you know, kind of one of the ultimate explorers and stuff like that, kind of like, you know, smartass and stuff like that. He makes it look fun. He makes it look dangerous and stuff like that. Even though, like, explorers, like, you look at real life stuff, you know, explorers had it rough. Like, they're roughing it, you know, it wasn't that exciting as like Lara Croft and Nathan Drake always make it out to be and stuff. So how do we get that into the game? How do we get that action feel, you know? So, like, again, cartography. How do we make cartography fun? You know, you put the things in here. Okay, we have this area. We triangulated this area now, but okay, once you triangulate, oh no, you stepped in a big creature's nest, right? Boom, as soon as you finish triangulating, now a creature spawns. You're like, oh man, I need help to fight this. And that's where other paths can kind of come in to help out the one person, you know? And then last but not least is the Settler. And the Settler we actually took from the real world, because there wasn't many games about, like, you know, construction battalion or like building that was like a military type building and stuff like that. The US Navy Seabees, which actually, fun fact, my dad actually retired from the US Navy as a Seabee. So it was kind of awesome to actually use this as inspiration and stuff like that. Because, like, yeah, it was like when my dad was stationed down in Panama, Central America, like, I lived down there with a bunch of those guys and stuff like that. And it's pretty awesome and exciting, because, like, these are the guys that go in before the army, before the whole military, and they build the airstrips. You know, they're the ones that are behind enemy lines building the bridges and stuff like that. They're also the ones that get sent out for, like, relief. So, like, when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, you know, a bunch of the Seabees and stuff like that, retired and current, all went down to Puerto Rico to help the infrastructure and help the power lines and stuff like that. So, like, we took a lot of the inspiration from Navy Seabees and also the Army Seabees too. They'll get mad if I don't say the Seabees there. But basically these combat engineers, making them a part of the game. So the Settlers in game would be sent on missions to where they are going to hostile territories and they're building stuff. You know, they're building little outposts, so that way when players are running around, they find these outposts in the world and they're like, oh man, I can get a free buff, or I can get some, you know, combat rations here, or I can, you know, oh, a quest giver now is here because of Settlers have built this up and contribute to this. It's also, Settlers is kind of the socializing type of thing, because everyone's contributing to these type of things. So it's not one person, one player building these outposts in game. It's 10, 20, 30 different players all contributing to this type of thing. So, like, sometimes you see a whole cadre of, like, Settlers and stuff just collecting resources around the world, then coming back to the main hub and then throwing resources at these things. So it is a way that players can get together to contribute to the whole and to help all the rest of the players around them, you know? So again, it goes back to balance. Like, every single path is so different that there's no actual balance, and trying to balance something would have really shoehorned the design, and I think it would have really hurt the design as all. So that is WildStar in a nutshell, and kind of the paths and kind of what we did there. So I really want you guys to take away from this and that, like, it could really help you to kind of identify what content's there, what content is missing, you know. And there's tons of design tools out there for y'all to use, whether it is going to be the Bartle Types, you know, they have the lenses from, like, you know, like the art of game design and stuff like that. Like, definitely use these tools to kind of start helping you figure out what content you need for the different demographics, right? Because again, I keep on stressing is that every single player is different. Different players want different things. So figure out what they want, figure out kind of what they need, right? So I hope you guys are able to take the test on your own. So kind of even before you take the test though, like, think about what type are you, you know? Are you a killer? Are you a socializer? Are you an achiever? Or you a sorry, I'm going blank on it. Or you're an explorer, right? And basically this will kind of answer why you gravitate towards certain games more so than others. So I am actually an explorer.
qué lindo.
I'm actually an explorer. That's why I love the game, like, you know, Breath of the Wild and stuff like that. I'm a 60% socializer, meaning like I love MMOs and I love playing just because other people are there. Like, I think I met and I started playing like Final Fantasy 11 and Dark Age of Camelot back in the day, but Final Fantasy 11 like stole my heart. And I met a group actually there. I still talk to my guild members from 2001, you know? And it's crazy because like I've never met half of them, but I still talk to them and stuff like that. Like, some friends are in Australia, some friends are in Asia, some friends are in Europe, you know, and some friends are all over like Central and South America, and some friends are like in, you know, in Canada and stuff like that. Like, there's so many people out there that I've met because I played games, you know. And I'm 40% achiever, so I've only platinumed like one game, and that was because I'm such a fanboy of that game. And then I'm not much of a competitor. Like, I don't compete that much, so that's why it's like the lowest on me. So I'm curious, you know, when you guys are discussing things, figure out what you like and then find other people that like different things and start trying to find those commonalities of those games, you know? And in conclusion, again, the Bartle Types are nothing but a tool. And hopefully they can really help you just identify holes in your content, holes in your game, talking about the motivations and the drivers of the people and stuff like that. User researchers, if you're at a larger company and you have access to user researchers, please, please, please talk to the user researchers. They can really help you they can help you find ways to make your content pop. They can help find ways to make your game better. A story of this is actually, we had a quest in one of the starter zones, and we found out through data that people were only like 40% of the people were completing this one quest. But then talking to the user researchers, they found out that the quest was started, but then it was not completed by that many people. But the people that stopped it always stopped it at the second quest. And how we fixed this was we just swapped the quest part. And we swapped the steps in the quest, and now the completion rate of that quest went up. And the reason is we had a quest where it was like, go to this person, talk to this person. The next part was find this thing in this area, but didn't tell you where it was. And the next part was talk to this person, right? So now that person was led by their hand to talk to this person, but then it was open-ended, but then it was closed again. So we swapped it to make the finding the last step of it and then return back to the person. And now people started complaining. And it's something simple that you wouldn't think about, but these little changes, you know, just by doing these things. Yeah, exactly, right? Like, any change kind of really goes through. So again, the Bartle Types are foundation, and you know what? Make your own stuff up and make your own studies and have fun with it.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
That's it. So thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me talk you guys' ears off.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Isa, you're muted. Yeah.
Oh,
The
thank you, Randy. Thank you, Randy. I'm Explorer too.
Nice.
And I'm very grateful for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you. And Sandy, do you want to say something? Oh, thank you, Sandy, and Tan Grande Jugando to be with us and to be our host.
you are the sugar mama here.
The Sugar Mamacita. Muchísimas gracias.
I don't know if I'm a killer. I believe I'm a killer. I am now going to
Are
make
you
a
driven
test.
by like competition?
Yeah, I love competition, but not all the types of competition, like just having the opportunity like to bet, for example, but not in like casino Vegas and big
Mhm.
amounts of money. It's more like there's no milk in the kitchen, and I'm going to tell you, yes, there is. It's bet like that's my kind
Nice.
of
You're probably a killer then, most
I
likely.
am
You gotta watch
killer.
her.
Yes,
You have
she's.
to watch her. Mhm.
I am. I would like that our well the people that is here in the stream and are commenting, let us know what is your type. No, for example, here Castor tell us that she's also an explorer and an achiever.
Nice.
Pretty awesome. And well, I really love your talk a lot. I'm learning a lot here. Thank you very much, Randy, for this opportunity to have you here.
Told you, Sandy. Told
I'm
you,
in love with
Randy.
Randy.
Yes, I know. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you all for having me, and thank you guys again for listening to me. And there's so much stuff out there. Just seriously, just the different types of design. It's all about psychology. It's all about
Yes.
finding out the motivations. Finding out what makes people tick. So really study up on what's out there, and you'd be surprised kind of the things you learn. So tons of resources. I can pass the resources on to Isabel, and she can pass it along to you guys before the game jam, hopefully.
Yes, please. Thank
Yay.
you.
Randy, I would say like I was a little bit sad because all of the works that you have there and you decide like to go for this game, and now I understand why you decide to go for this game, to explain all the types of players. And thank you very much for taking the time to do this. And everyone, thank you for being here. And now let's talk about a little bit in Spanish of what is going to happen with the Game Jam Plus.
Thank you, Randy. Chicos, bueno, pues invitándolos nuevamente al Game Jam Plus México, que va a iniciar el viernes y concluye el domingo. Recuerden que vamos a tener 3 charlas más, martes, miércoles y jueves a la misma hora, 7 de la noche, por estas mismas redes. Nos vemos aquí en Facebook el día de mañana.
Tengan en cuenta que esta es una jam que se realiza como en 50 y pico de países, entonces aprovechen justamente pues que México tiene su propia locación, es una jam abierta, es una jam que también se va a hacer en Colombia. Colombia va a estar adoptando a algunos jammers de Latinoamérica, entonces también con nosotros van a estar los jammers chilenos posiblemente. Y pues bueno, si otra parte de la comunidad se pega pues al jam colombiano, serán perfectamente bienvenidos. Ustedes saben que los amamos toda Latinoamérica. Y pues nada,
Así es.
manténganse conectados con esta charla, tienen que compartirla. Este conocimiento es oro y yo necesito más, justamente, o sea, yo digo yo necesito, pero pues eso es parte de la industria de desarrollo de videojuegos, ¿no? Necesito más game designers en la industria de desarrollo de videojuegos. Me
Sí.
están faltando game designers, gente. Entonces, sí, necesitamos que estén súper poderosos con todo este estilo de contenido. Recuerden que además pueden apoyarnos en las redes de Tan Grande y Jugando en Patreon para que continuemos apoyando las comunidades de Latinoamérica. Estamos apoyando a Pink Bear Studios, estamos apoyando a MGT Therapy, también estamos apoyando comunidades en justamente Argentina. Entonces, hágale, o sea, denos una manita para seguir apoyando más comunidades de desarrolladores de juegos en América Latina. Y pues sin nada más que decir, gente. ¿Listos? ¿Nos vamos?
Recuerden, compartan, tenemos 50 becas, así es, compartan. Y los esperamos ahí en nuestro jam. Recuerden que todo lo que se junte será para el ganador y se va a Brasil. Ah.
I think the girls with their nails done now.